YouTube, it's Tone back with another one for you today. And so this is a good one. I think that you'll find it interesting. This is to add on. You know what? When I did the last creditors and their bonds, I didn't start from the beginning. I started at like some like random ass middle point and shit. That's something that I thought you guys needed to know quick. So I did that. So this here, starting at the beginning, and I advise everybody who is trying to become free to first take the time to understand how the commercial system works, because the underlying factor, I think, in anything that you're going to deal with when it comes to government in general, and just anything in general, everything's a fucking negotiation. It's an offer. And then especially when it comes to these government acting personnel, right? Acting governing personnel, that the underlying factor when you're dealing with them is it's all commercial. It is all commercial because they're all corporations. So how could they operate in a different capacity other than the one that they were set up in? So you're set up as a commercial enterprise, you're going to have to operate under those commercial principles, right? So that's all governed by Uniform Commercial Code essentially, and so that's why there is no law. There's commercial code. That's what there is. So now that you know that, we're going to move into this here. Creditors and their bonds. Bond. In every case, a bond represents a debt. Its holder is a creditor of the corporation and not a part owner, as is the shareholder. The word bond is sometimes used more broadly to refer also to unsecured debt instruments. All right? So a bond is a promise to pay, essentially, is what it is. And any bond so we'll get into what the bonds are for you and what they mean and what they're based upon and shit like that in the next couple of pages. So the definitions used here generally from Black's 6. So that's the fuck is it? It's a dictionary that they use. So it's called Black's Law Dictionary, and they use it for their black magic. That's why it's called black. That's why that dude that calls himself a judge wears a black dress. It's all just some crazy cross-dressing fucking black magic bullshit. That's what it is. So bond supporting credit authorizations. This bond is the debt side of the implied contract that resulted when your grandparents took all their gold to the Federal Reserve Banks May 1st, 1933. So a bond is always evidence of a debt. Just like your certificate of live birth is a bond, right? It's a promise to pay. They essentially placed you in debt before you could even fucking speak. So that's not legal, for one. You know what I mean? There's something called the Baby Act. You can look that up, and that essentially says that you can't be held liable for a contract that was entered into when you were a minor, right? So how are they gonna hold you liable for some shit that you never fucking agreed to in the first place, right? That's between your mother and the fucking state. It has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? So anyway, it doesn't stop the fact that you should capture that being and whip your own fucking slave. Whip your own slave. You know what I mean? So a bond is always evidence of debt. It can be a liability to the debtor, or an asset to the creditor. And you'll find that the banks do double book entry, where they're writing it off as a liability and as an asset, which allows them with fractal banking to go ahead and lend out 10 times the amount of whatever you lend them, right? Because they're not allowed to give you their own money, and they can't give you their customers' money. So what do? They securitize the debt as an asset, and then they then they write it in a different book as a liability, because they have to pay it back to you. So when you deposit money into a bank, they're writing it off as a asset and a liability. So it's an asset because they have it, and it's a liability because they have to pay it back. So this is where a lot of the fraud comes in and shit like that. I mean, I'd be willing to bet they even create fake people with fake bonds being born in order to fucking securitize that, right? So when you see all these fake people dying off now, they're probably killing off a lot of their fake fucking people that they have fucking created out of thin air. So the bond is also the implied debt that resulted when you apply for a birth certificate for new entities, straw men. You requested that the states create when you had your babies. You put a description of your baby on the application. This tied the baby and the straw man together, as long as the described baby man lived. When the man dies, the straw man is terminated by the state with a death certificate. It has no commercial energy without the man, right? as it doesn't. And so that's why I find it hard to fathom why they would imagine that they have any say in what the fuck happens with this commercial entity that's created, when they know that it has no value without you. So really, what the fuck is the value? The value is you, isn't it? They're not putting nothing into it. It's all you. So the strong man, a front, a third party who is put up in name only to take part in a transaction. Nominal party to a transaction. 1, John, who acts as an agent for another, John, for the purposes of taking a title to real property and executing whatever documents and instruments the principal John may direct respecting the property person, John, who purchases property for another, to conceal identity or real purchaser, or to accomplish something that is otherwise not allowed, because you can't mix public and private, right? So they put a description of you onto the public document, but it isn't really you. They only have jurisdiction over that particular document. That's it. Implied partnership. One which is not a real partnership, but which is recognized by the court as such because of the conduct of the parties, right? Because you're going in there fucking defending that shit as if it's you. So they're looking at you like the asshole that you are when you go in there talking about that you're a fucking defendant. How the fuck could you be when they're in there talking about a piece of paper? So they already know that you're an asshole, and they're gonna run right the fuck through you, guaranteed, unless you know who the fuck you are and that you cannot be a piece of fucking paper, can you? No, because you're standing there holding it. Come on, man. The defendant. I mean, it's fucking silly now when you fucking talk about it like what it really is, but this is what the fuck it really is. The defendant trusts you as a trustee as the defendant's surety. In effect, the parties is stopped from denying the existence of a partnership. That is dishonor. This bond is also the implied debt that resulted when you applied for a title to a car, a mortgage, or any other loan that resulted in collateral being registered with the state. You cannot be required to pledge your substance, but you can voluntarily pledge it to help the United States through its bankruptcy status. Pledge a bailment. And this is what we're doing, is helping them through the fucking bankruptcy. So when they drag you into court with a fucking commercial charge, what the fuck would they like you to pay with when there is no fucking money? Huh? Oh, they want you to fucking just sit in jail until the fuck until the bond reaches the fucking maturity so they can cash it in. Yeah, fuck yourself, bro. How about that? How about you go fucking sit in jail until that shit fucking matures, you asshole? You see? I mean, see what they do, right? Mind you, this shit has nothing to do with you when you're the one trying to help them, but you're the one that has to sit in fucking jail? Absolutely not. You're out of your fucking mind. So bailment, a delivery of goods or personal property by... I'm just laughing because of how stupid it is. I mean, you see how fucking retarded the goddamn system is? And, you know, I don't even know if they even know this, the people who work in those courthouses and shit, because every time you go in there with any documentation similar to what I'm showing you here, they look at you like you're the asshole. But when you ask them when was the last time they ever opened a fucking law book, why don't you ask them that? Ask them that. A bailment, a delivery of goods or personal property by one bailer, strawman, to another bailee, state, or U.S. in trust for the execution of a special object, exemption upon or in relation to such goods. If you do not volunteer, you may be given choices to make it easier for you to volunteer, but you must always do this voluntarily. You are not asked to give your substance, only to pledge it. While you keep possession of the substance, in return you get the implied bond, which is the promise to pay. The straw man received the social security number. The correlating private side number is the exemption identification number, the same digits just without the dashes. So you see here, public debt number 123-45-6789. That's the front of the social, right? That's the straw man, debtor, agent of the U.S. or state. The private exemption number is the same number without your dashes. That makes you the creditor, and this is how you're able to offset any debts by using it in such a fashion, right? As you can find in my A4V videos and shit like that. You see it with the red letters. And that's going to be, you know, stamped on any offer at a 45-degree angle to offset it from the font that's already on there, so it doesn't fucking mix in there. You know what I mean? I don't believe it's for any other reason other than that purpose, to offset it from the font that's already on the offer. So the strawman is a creation of the debtor corporation, so it is presumed to be an officer, agent, or employee of the debtor corporation. It must file tax returns and it must file all the corporate rules and regulations. The man, on the other hand, is not a creation of the debtor corporation, but is the presumed representative of the strawman. The man is also the one who had the creditor side of the debt the U.S. owes. So you are the creditor, and your all caps is the debtor. See, you see what that is there? So you don't ever want to accept the liability for the debtor because you're merely a an authorized representative of it. And so when you look at the back of your Social Security card, the line that you sign on the back of the card says authorized representative in microscopic print. You get a fucking magnifying glass, go look at the back of your social right now where you signed it. That line says authorized representative. Check that out. So that can never be you. This is the national debt, at least a part of it. Part of the national debt is owed to the people who pledge their substance in return for an exemption for paying public debts. The U.S. runs on credit. That's it. Credits and debits. There is no fucking money. It does not have its own credit. It is a bankrupt organization. Everything is backed by the full faith and credit of the people. We have faith that the U.S. will honor its debt, and we have to know how to use our credit. The straw man cannot use your credit on its own, but it can use it if you authorize it. Our authorization is backed by the implied contract and the resulting bond debt the U.S. has to the people. The U.S. has a debt to you. It owes you money because you have been crediting it by everything that you do. Every time you've ever given your social, you're essentially funding the fucking country with whatever you give your social to. And it's funny how they treat you like the asshole, right? It's crazy. As long as the people are not acting like debtors and victims, they can use their credit. When the people start acting like debtors, strawmen, they dishonor their own heritage and rights, which is true. I'm kind of starting to see now how much work people are not willing to put into this shit, and it's crazy. And this is why I'm fucking reading it for you, because I know none of you are gonna fucking sit down and read it. None of you even ask me for the fucking books that I be reading to you guys. So you guys don't want to fucking read it. You want somebody to read it to you. So here you go, right? So here we go. So your private debt instruments are backed by the bond. The number on the bond is 1 through 9 without the digits for John Doe, bond for discharge. This is your credit holder side of the bond, evidence of a debt. When you use a bond for discharge, you are using your credit backed by the implied bond, the debt, resulting from your pledges to help the U.S. through its bankruptcy. By even entertaining the commerce in general, you're essentially helping it by using your credit to fund any transaction. But they'll go ahead and tell you that you have to pay for it again, and they'll send you bills and shit like that, right? Even though you already fucking paid for it, they're still gonna try to double and triple fucking dip on you. This is what they're doing to everybody. There is no value limit to this bond, as you voluntarily agree to pledge every bit of your substance you get until the money is put back into circulation. All the substance you have, cars, dirt, shoes, food, toothbrushes, was acquired by giving the merchants Federal Reserve notes, which are promises to pay, right? The promissory notes that you can create just as well based on the value of whatever your bond is, right? So you can never get title to the things unless you pay for them. Since there is no money in the U.S., only debt paper. Every time you get a pair of shoes, you're exchanging a debt for the shoe. In the U.S. since 1933, that is an acceptable practice outside the U.S. in the states, that is not acceptable. If you try to get shoes without paying for them in the States, you will be put in jail for stealing. But in the jurisdiction of the U.S., you can get possession of the shoes by giving the merchant debt paper. You just can't get the title. If you want the title, you will have to give the merchant a real asset from the private side, substance. The only substance that is yours is your exemption. That equates to credit and admiralty and equity, right? So right here, March 9, 1933, 73rd Congress, Mr. Patman. Under the new laws, the money is issued to the banks in return for the government obligations. Bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances, which is what a A4V is, when you stamp it with your red information and all that. That's what that is. So the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and all the property of all the people in the nation. Mr. Patman, the money so issued will not have 1 penny of gold coverage behind it because it does not really need it. It doesn't. And it fucking doesn't need it. I mean, really, it's just a concept. The whole money concept in general is a fucking concept. So, and that's a fact. So then here, $20 bill that was backed by gold at one point. So the bills of exchange are government obligations and to the private investors. The banker's acceptance are government obligations. When you have accepted a presentment for value and you sign it, you have just done a banker's acceptance. The Public banks can also do a banker's acceptance. It is not designated to just one side or the other. Have you asked who is issuing the new money to the banks? Can the government issue money to the banks? Can other banks issue money to other banks? Where is this new money that is going to be issued to the banks? Where does the bank go when it wants new or more money issued? The people have always been private bankers in the States of America. Now we also have public bankers. The people used to dig the gold and silver out of the ground, have it minted, and then put it into circulation. Now the people sign notes and give them to the banks to turn into debt money, and the banks put the debt into circulation as money. It would be against the law for people to do that. They have to issue their credit money to the banks to do through strawman, right? And then it turns into digital cash. So, and that's in a whole nother realm. So when you use the U.S. bond, even though it is an implied bond to discharge a public debt, the debt is discharged. House Joint Resolution, June 5th, 1933, House Joint Resolution 192. Is the written public insurance policy guaranteeing that this can be done? The people are still issuing new money to the banks by signing notes and giving them to the banks. That's why some of these clowns will have you write out a check to yourself, and they'll take it and give you cash out of your accounts like they do over here in PR a lot. You know what I'm saying? What they're really doing, and then you're supposed to get that check back. So they'll go ahead and collect all those checks and sell them in the fucking bond market, right? So they're selling the money that you create, even though you already. And it's fucking crazy. The shit is crazy, really. And I don't know what they're even doing in other countries and shit, because who the fuck even knows? So, and here, implied, the word is used in law to contrast, to express where the intention in regard to the subject matter is not manifested by explicit and direct words, but is gathered by the implication or necessary actions from the circumstances, the general language, or the conduct of the parties. Implied contract. So it doesn't have to be something that you physically wrote or some shit like that. It could be just the way that you're answering their fucking questions as if you have an obligation. Now you have a fucking implied contract because they think that you somehow entered into it by even answering their fucking questions in a way that they deem to be fucking and implied. You know, it's stupid bullshit. But these are the things, and this is why I don't even feel comfortable speaking to them anymore, because I'm not trying to get sucked into any of their fucking implied stupid ass contracts by answering their questions, by me trying to be fucking polite and then entering into a contract with them. You literally have to be a dickhead to these fucking clowns for them to leave you alone. That shit is crazy. But this is the world that we live in. So using the bond, debt to discharge another debt is common in the U.S. Mr. Patman said the new money represented on a mortgage on all the homes and other property of the people of the nation. He used the word nation with an expansive intent. There were and are no people in the nation. Everybody's been commercially trafficked off the land until you say that you're fucking alive and that you're here. It's crazy, and that's done through a Form 56F. So the nation is a political creation, but there are people behind all of the strawmen, which are in the nation. On a mortgage, there is always a debtor and a creditor. The new money was issued based on the people and the U.S. corporations turning in their gold. The corporations were controlled by the U.S., but the people were not. The corporations had no substance, but the people did. The people volunteered to enter into an implied contract with the U.S. The new deal was announced in Congress in March 1933. The executive order was given in April. The gold had to be deposited in a Federal Reserve banks by May 1st. Excuse me. The Congress proclaimed its public policy in House Joint Resolution 192 in June. The new public policy was that no creditor on this new mortgage could require payment in any particular form of the U.S. Coin or currency. As creditors, the people could not require payment for any new mortgage in gold. Neither could any other creditor. That new deal made the people who participated in the salvation of the U.S. corporations creditors. It also made debtors of the U.S. corporations, their officers, agents, and employees, including all the strawmen. This is an example of set-off for an adjustment of mutual debts, right? So one will cancel out the other. The straw man owes the debt to the U.S. corporation, and the U.S. owes a debt through an implied promise to the man. The U.S. can never pay the man because there is no money, but the U.S. can give the straw man debt money it can use in commerce in the U.S. to use to get possession of products and services for you. You get to use the products or services, When you use a bond to discharge a public debt, you have used your exemption, your credit, which is the only title that you can ever have on the private side. You are an investor in the U.S. corporations. That does not make you an owner. It makes you a creditor, right? So the debtor pretty much loses all the time, and the debtor is the U.S. corporation. So at any point, they're out of line when they're fucking treating you any different than the fucking king that you are, because who the fuck is funding all this shit? It sure isn't them. Sure isn't them. So put them in a position to state exactly what their claim is and their fucking position in the whole claim in general is, right? You have to make them say that shit on the record. They can't and they won't. But you have to know the right questions to ask them. You really don't have to answer shit. Just ask the right questions to make them say exactly who it is that they are and what the fuck that they're doing. Because who do you fucking protect and who do you serve? You know what I'm saying? Who do you really work for? So, and that's what it is, man. So, it is a game of chess. Stop playing checkers. That's what I got for you for now. Until we meet again.